Of course, AI became really the next wave of how do we help companies make better decisions with technology and with data. And so we've rolled with the punches, and here we are working with finally some seriously large organizations and doing some really cool stuff. When we talk about AI and supply chain, it's really using data, using technology to be able to withstand all the chaos that we see in the world today.
AI isn't the future, it's now. And whether you're in HR, sales, operations, or leadership, the choices you make today will determine whether you thrive or get left behind.
Today on Voice or Victim, we are getting into the fascinating world where artificial intelligence meets global supply chains. And our guest is one of the people who is actually making that happen. Chris Andrassy is the co-founder and CEO of Astral Insights, a boutique AI enablement firm that helps some of the biggest brands in the world streamline their supply chains with cutting-edge, scalable AI platforms. From strategy to implementation, his team builds custom AI assistants that don't just save time, they transform how entire companies operate. So in short, Chris is the guy that you are going to call when supply chain is stuck in the past and you need to future-proof your operations. He's not just talking about AI, y'all. He is building it, he is deploying it, and he is helping brands use it to create real competitive advantage. So whether you are AI curious or you're just trying to figure out how to use it without getting overwhelmed, today's conversation is packed with insights on how to lead with innovation and stay ahead of the curve. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm staying busy.
Oh my God, I know. So you're actually working with some of the world's biggest brands today. Can you tell us the story of how Astral Insights came to be?
I can. Well, I'll try to. It's sort of a wandering story, but I'll try to bring it together. And we actually got started right after COVID. So right at the beginning. So during, what was that, March of 2020, I think. Yep. And an individual who was a close friend at the time and now my co-founder, Alfonso Albuquerque, and we were working in New York City, two of the big four firms in consulting, as a lot of people do who graduate Lehigh University. That's sort of the traditional path is go to New York City and work in consulting and do all that. And for me personally, one of my favorite parts of the job was going to travel and going to see a client and go into the warehouse and see what the problems were and figure out what sort of technology was going to help them. And once COVID happened, everything really came to a standstill. And it was, sit in a cubicle every day. And you have a lot of time to think about, okay, we're young and we had taken some entrepreneurial type courses while at Lehigh. And at some point we looked at each other and said, hey, what do we know how to do? What skills do we have? Maybe we can go out and try something on our own. And so that year during COVID, we started selling basically like financial modeling services and basic dashboarding services. So we would cold email and cold call startups and tell them, if you're looking to raise money, we'll help you project how much you're going to make, or we'll help you build some great graphs and charts for your pitch deck and things like that. And after a couple months, we had a few clients, and to the point we said, hey, we're young enough, we're not taking that much risk. I think worst case scenario, we could go back to those firms, and decided to part ways with our jobs and go do this full time. And year after year, we started really just evolving with the technology. We found our way into manufacturing and supply chain through some connections, through alumni and just people we had known. And of course, AI became really the next wave of how do we help companies make better decisions with technology and with data. And so we've rolled with the punches, and here we are working with finally some seriously large organizations and doing some really cool stuff.
Well, I love this because we could easily turn this whole thing into just a leadership podcast where we talk about leading into the nudges on where you can't see what the outcome is going to be, right? And just, giving it your best, right? But for all of the people who are listening that might not understand it, and maybe myself included, if I'm really honest here, what exactly does AI-powered supply chain optimization mean? And why is that such a mouthful?
It really is, and made worse by the fact that AI means so many things right now. So, AI really just means a computer system that's going to help you do something. And it's either going to help you do a task faster or more efficiently, or it's going to help you make a better decision. It's going to give you information you didn't have before. And so really right now, when we talk about supply chain, what we talk about a lot is resilience and the ability to adjust if there's a tariff. Everybody knows what's going on right now. When there's another tariff, when there's another flip-flop, if there's a hurricane in a location where I buy a lot of my materials for the widgets I sell, if there's an increase in price, how do I quickly respond to that so that my customers still get the goods that they expect? And I'm not going crazy with delays or higher prices. So when we talk about AI and supply chain, it's really using data, using technology to be able to withstand all the chaos that we see in the world today.
And when you are describing AI from that perspective, right, I'm assuming you're talking more about traditional machine learning and less about GenAI, which is a subset of machine learning. But so can you just help for our audience to understand, one, what type of AI are you using, are you describing for your supply chain part of your business? And then on top of that, are there aspects of the more known, still lesser known, but more known Gen AI tools, techniques to help your day-to-day business or life? Yeah,
100%. And with supply chain, there's actually a bit of both. So there's the traditional machine learning, as you mentioned, more for let's forecast better. Let's predict what's going to happen with demand or predictive analytics. Where the Gen AI comes in is how you consume that information. So in the past, typically we'd only consume information in charts or dashboards or maybe even tabular form where you see a bunch of numbers. And now we're actually building sort of conversational assistants that can give you that information in a very intuitive way and also in a way that's personalized to you. So maybe Greg wants just high level, just tell me the bottom line. And let's pretend, Erica, you want to see every single detail. You want to see 0.001 accuracy. And so the bot understands that and can give you information how you want to see it. So for the business, we actually use a bit of both. Personally, to your question, I use ChatGPT every day at this point for just brainstorming and sense checking things is honestly one of the big things. Looking at writing an email of, hey, maybe I could spruce this up, make it a little more creative, or am I using the exact right punctuation here just to check myself? I find myself using it for things like that quite a bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really think about it. I guess to your point, when you brought up data visualization and analytics, I know from a Salesforce, like from a Tableau perspective, they have Tableau Pulse, which has effectively Gen BI, right? So the idea of being able to have a conversation with your data, and that's a key point that we keep trying to make for folks when we talk about AI and we talk about Gen AI in particular. It's very much having a conversation. Right. And the reason why I want to keep reiterating that for AI Voice of Victim, we are trying to move people from anxious to curious. And a lot of times people are very anxious with the idea because they hear AI, they think I got to write code. Like, no, man, just have a conversation. Ask it the things in plain English, right? That you or whatever, right? But ask the things in a conversational way. But to your point, you also brought up something that I think that's very critical to AI, which is personalization or hyper-personalization, right? The idea that me as a CEO, I want to expect, X, Y, and Z in summary format or in a dashboard format, right? Erica may want to have, a lot more detail, but to be able to take one thing and then output it in, 1,000 different ways to meet the person where they are and what they need is super powerful. So thank you for explaining that. I told Chris off camera in a previous conversation, I was like, it's also awesome that Astral Insights is also AI, right? Yes. I was like, now, was that intentional? AI. Was that intentional or like?
It was sort of. It was a little bit before AI became what it is right now in terms of the craze. But we started off actually as the Astral Consulting Group. And after we talked to a lot of advisors and we kind of thought about the positioning and the vibe of the company, we're like, well, consulting group is usually a little more, you imagine kind of a legacy, bigger company giving advice on company strategy. And where we were going was we want to be building things. We want to be building solutions and technology. And so we're, okay, how do we make it seem a bit more like a tech company, a little less like a consulting company? And we like the name Astral. That's kind of another side story. So we're like, okay, what can I add after Astral? I just went through a bunch of things and we did a lot of data viz and analytics at the time. And so Insights was one of the things, and it just so happened to be also AI. So it just kind of worked out.
I love it when it works out that way.
Yeah, you do.
Oh my gosh. So Chris, with building all these AI assistants that help streamline workflows, where are you finding that human touch still matters the most?
Well, I think about it almost in terms of training wheels, like teaching a kid how to ride a bike. Of course, you're not going to put your son or daughter on a bike and sort of push them and say good luck, and then they fall and they're going to have that scar tissue, mentally and physically, and maybe they don't want to get on a bike after. So of course you're going to give them training wheels and steadily build it up. And I say that because in our work we'll help with, say, looking at like purchase orders. If I'm in the procurement team in one of my clients, and maybe I send a ton of emails back and forth, and so I'm going to build an AI system to help actually manage some of those emails for me. Take some information out, write up the email, send them. But I'm not just going to have on day one that AI write an email and send it to my suppliers for me. Maybe there's a spelling issue, or maybe it doesn't really communicate the style that I want. So I'm going to have a human who can effectively give that feedback to the system to say, yes, it's good, or hey, maybe not, and adjust X or adjust Y. And only when I get to that level of 95 or 99% confidence, or even higher, depending on the use case, then I can turn that task over to the AI and say, okay, AI, you handle that, and I'll focus over here. I'll be a little more strategic over here. So there's sort of this natural learning curve for any workflow or any process where we would apply AI, where the human is increasingly less in the loop. But I still think we're at the point where a human is mostly in the loop for the majority of these things. We're not at the point where we have, an AI just running my sales team, for example.
Right.
Maybe in 5 years, who knows? But yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. We talk a lot about the fear behind AI. And so I love to hear that, no, the human's got to be involved every step of the way. But that leads me to my next question, which is, what are the skills that people should really be focusing in on and starting to develop today so that they can kind of grow and adapt with AI? And we've talked a lot about prompt engineering.
For sure.
Right? So are there any others maybe that we could cover?
Yeah, prompt engineering is definitely one. And what immediately popped into mind when you said that was critical thinking, actually, because when you look at ChatGPT, and this is becoming an interesting just topic with everything that's going on with politics, and people talk about echo chambers, this idea that, I go on to Twitter, I go on to Instagram, or wherever the case may be, and I really only see things that affirm what I already believe. Right. And so there's this tendency for AI, even ChatGPT, to agree with us or to sort of mirror us or to amplify what we already believe. And because of that, I think it's increasingly important that we develop the ability to really critically think and ask ourselves, why do we think this? Is that really true? Why am I taking that at face value or assuming it's true? So I think in the world of AI, and this applies to business and certainly to think about younger kids going through school right now, that the ability to critically think is going to be even more important than it is right now.
I am very intrigued about how it's going to change, education and the educational system, right? Yeah. And as it stands today, my kids come home, they sit on the counter, they attempt to do their homework. They also attempt to cheat in the ways that all kids do by asking Alexa, what's, 7 plus 8? And so I'm interested to see how that's going to evolve.
Well, a couple of things. One, you touched on, we always talk about the 5 C's of humanity, right? And creative thinking is one of, or critical thinking is one of those, right? So we ask, what are the things that make us human versus, the machine, right? And it's critical thinking, curiosity, collaboration, community, and creativity, right? Those are the things. So if you net down on those 5 C's, those are the things that keep that human in the loop, right? Making us understand and stay grounded. Now, the next thing I was just going to say, I'm going to push back on my co-host here, right? I don't view it as cheating, right? As my kids are learning a lot of things faster. And there's actually a study of, I was listening to a podcast recently. I think I want to say it's a school called an Alpha School or something, but they're using AI to help teach these youth, right? And they're saying the scores and what they know, it is off the charts. Right? They're incredibly, smarter than the average. So the whole idea when people say oh, no, they're not going to be as smart. I'm you're actually going to learn a lot faster, right? I'm sure someone said when the encyclopedia or the dictionary came out, I was oh, they're going to be, now you can cheat. You're going to be able to go into this book and go get the answers. Oh, I can learn words that I never knew that, because if you think about it, I'm not a knock on my parents, but my parents, they didn't go to college.
Yeah.
So the vocabulary in my house was a lot lower than in other homes. And I would hear words and I'm like, I don't even know what you're saying right now. Right.
Yeah.
And so the idea for me is, I think that what we do as a society need to understand is what are the benefits? Because it's very easy. Was in a group thread yesterday with someone and they were showing their HR leader was saying, oh, well, this person was using, some AI tool like Granola or something, and it was messing with their audio that was coming through, right? Because of the way that it filters through the audio. And they're like, oh, they completely told on themselves that they were cheating on the interview. I was like, I don't call that cheating. Maybe they wanted to just understand and have takeaways, and know exactly what was discussed. But if we have this view already that using these things, if we have this already unconscious bias that by using these, you are cheating something, then we're going to perpetuate, right, a scenario in which we're actually not getting people to adopt. So I know what you meant. I'm just simply calling it out and using it as an opportunity to inject like some, I don't know.
Just disagreement, just straight up disagreement.
I just want to argue for some argument with you, Eric, because you're right too often, damn it.
And
Chris, I'm here to change that, okay?
And I'm right about that. Oh my God. Okay,
Yes,
Chris.
sorry.
Well, we got to appreciate that.
Let me take this conversation from being derailed back to the tracks, okay? I want to know, right, as a CEO, as a founder in the space of AI, it is just baffling to me, honestly, that you can already have this company up, running, and successful when so much of the world doesn't even know what AI is yet. So my question for you, it is more along the leadership lines of that. But number one, where did you find, I guess, the courage to really lean into that, right? Because all of our people who are listening are going to need the courage to lean into this change and adopting AI and bringing it into the future. So I'm just really curious from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah, it's a great question. And for me, it's been a very incremental thing, which I think made it a little less scary. So it wasn't on day one, we're going to become an AI company in supply chain and we want to work for XYZ company and just kind of flipping a switch or jumping off of the ledge. It was a bit more of a gradual process for me where we really listened to the market and who our clients were. And, we're getting to the point where we're becoming a little bit more productized as a company, but we're still ultimately a services-based firm. And I say that meaning we always started by leading into what our clients were telling us that they needed and what they wanted. And so I think that gives us a bit of a unique perspective. So we didn't go in saying AI is really hot. How do we apply AI? We went in saying our customers want the ability to have those personalized insights, or they really had challenges with all the time they spent in Excel crunching these numbers. They always felt like they were reacting rather than being able to predict or be proactive. And now what are those tools we can go sharpen, those knives we could sharpen and put in our toolkit to actually do that? So it was very much a gradual process. And now we're pretty fully gung-ho into it and leaned into it. But I think definitely made it a little more approachable because we were confident that it's something that people wanted.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because number one, everybody sees the shiny object that you have today and they think it was just, bing, bang, boom, done. Yeah. It's not. It's incremental. It takes work. But the second reason I'm really glad you said that is because I think people need to start thinking more through the lens of what is the problem I'm trying to solve versus I'm just going to put this out there. Yeah. Right. Like we so often as a human, we think we have this idea that is just so great and we don't really think of it from a problem solving standpoint first. So I find that super fascinating. But what is the biggest challenge that you are seeing maybe with getting clients to lean in further?
Yeah, I think, it depends on the size of the company. For larger companies that are really well established, there's concerns around things like cybersecurity. And there are certainly ways around that probably go beyond the scope of this conversation. But, there's just concern because it's a new technology that you see what can happen with like ChatGPT where it hallucinates and makes things up. And people aren't really used to a computer that was even capable of doing something like that or saying something that's not true, but it sounds true. So back to our critical thinking thing, if you don't apply critical thinking, it sounds like it would be true and you're just going to take it at face value. So I think there's security concerns and concerns about hallucination is definitely a big thing for us. And those can be overcome. Those are conversations. There's ways to dip your toes in and become more comfortable. The one other thing is also just data. We're dealing with relatively large, either mid-sized to even enterprise scale, multi-billion-dollar companies with a lot of data and a lot of systems. And they know that, of course, to get this AI to the state that it can help me with decisions or whatever the case may be, it's going to be trained on my data. And maybe there's duplicates in my data and there's missing entries. And I don't necessarily trust what my salesperson put into Salesforce the other day and if it's right. So the data quality is also a big concern as well.
Yeah, I would say, data, I always say garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I always tell folks, I'm like, from a data perspective, yes, garbage in, garbage out. I say from an AI perspective, garbage in, catastrophic outcomes on the other side.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Like because to your point, it's generative. The whole point of that, it is by design trained to give you an answer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
By design, it will generate something. And the more context you give it, right, the more guardrails, the more that you put the human in the loop. You said something about 95% confidence, right? There are certain things that you can do also from a prompting perspective to say, until you're 95% confident, ask me clarifying questions, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right. There are things that you can do from that perspective. One of the things I've heard recently too is the idea that once you start to show how often humans are flawed in comparison, right? A lot of these executives start to it starts to turn in their mind. You're like, okay, so I did in a previous engagement, I did something similar for forecasting with machine learning with a group, right? Yeah. And they said on a good day, their own internal forecasting, their sales team was only 20 to 40% accurate, right? So when we're showing something that is 95% accurate, it's like not a lot of executives are going to say, all right, you didn't get 100%.
Yeah.
Once you compare, right, what the human has been able to do over time. So I think that's thing one. On a previous episode, we had a guest that also took the same kind of approach, kind of the bite-sized approach. Yeah. This individual, Dana Peebles, was talking about 5K that she wanted to run. She said, I know I can't start tomorrow and just go run. Yeah. And I think more people need to understand that. There was what's the book? Or it was the phrase, how you eat an elephant. Have you ever seen
how
that?
do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. Yeah. Like people look at AI as this, and you have a lot of executives out there, and it's hard to be long-winded, but folks have these goals that are basically, you guys go out there and go eat the damn elephant. Yeah. And everybody's like, where do I start? I don't know what to do. What does that mean? So there's this disparity of there are these goals as executives that they want to see, but what they're not understanding, and the whole point of AI Voice of Victim is, again, move people from anxious to curious, which is, you said you want to hit this goal, Chris, but now I got 90% of my organization that thinks what you just said was, I'm losing my job. Yeah. Right. And so we got to thread that needle a little bit better as a society and as business leaders. So how are you doing that internally?
Yeah.
With your company?
No, that's a huge factor. I mean, for us, I think we're sort of lucky in the sense that everybody, at least on our team, is very, I'd say, AI forward, or they naturally want to work in AI. But there definitely is a balance of things like using coding tools like Cursor and Windsurf. And so how much should I lean into AI for coding, and how much should I rely on the expertise that I've gained from being a developer for 5, 10, 20 years and going to school? So there's definitely the balance there. But I go back to something you mentioned, Greg, and really viewing it as a tool and viewing it as a situational thing. So look at the problem, look at what we're trying to accomplish, and then understand how much or how little AI should be applied, and then really break it down into its subtasks. And that's something I would certainly say when we talk to students back at Lehigh and things is, to your point, look at what you can do with AI today. Look at what some prompting techniques you can apply that are going to help you on something that's right in front of you, and really take it one step at a time, rather than trying to become an expert in AI or trying to become a software engineer in a month because you have these tools that can help you.
Do you have any favorite client transformational stories that you can share without giving away too much? Because I'm just so intrigued to hear, especially living in the more curious world, So share if you can. Yeah, well, one we're working on right now that is really exciting to me is with a manufacturing company. And what I think is really exciting is you see this in a lot of companies, this idea of what people call tribal knowledge or institutional knowledge. So in this case, they make cosmetic products. Some of the
Think of like an Olay or like a mascara. And there's really machines that do these very fine motor movements to put the seal on and to make sure it's capped. And throughout, there's all these specialized machines that do that on an assembly line. And they have these technicians who have to understand how to fix them if something breaks. And a lot of that knowledge is not in a database anymore. A lot of times it's just in somebody's mind. And maybe it's only in the mind of the person who's been there 20 years, but not the person who got hired 6 months ago or 1 year ago. And some of that information may be just written down in manuals, literally pen and paper, like troubleshooting guides. And so the solution we're building is a digital assistant to actually help them diagnose why a machine went down and go through a process they have internally called 6W2H, which is just their way. It's like who, what, when, why, how, I believe. And they just use that to basically write down and document what the failure was, what they did about it, and how they fixed it so that they can create a standard so it doesn't happen again. So we're building a system that's able to absorb that tribal knowledge, which is using GenAI and LLMs, and then be able to communicate pieces of that tribal knowledge back to people when there was a failure to help them fix it. And that's one of the biggest areas of opportunity we're seeing is that broader picture of the shop floor in a manufacturing context, because every company is different and it takes years to really understand the intricate details. And a lot of that information, again, just it doesn't live in a database. So there's just this big gap of how can I start absorbing that information into an AI-based system? And so for the one client in particular, the main facility we're piloting it is here in Greensboro. And then if it goes well, looking to expand that across a much larger footprint. And it's something we're also working with some partner organizations and other companies to try to bring this to life in a bigger way, because we've just heard great reception to it.
That's like, I mean, you're talking about democratization of internal intelligence, right? In an organization.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point, I mean, it took many, many years. And that's where people are like, all right, AI can't replace me because of this, and this. And like, first of all, stop thinking of it that way. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Let it augment or enhance. I always tell folks, like, just don't call it artificial intelligence. Call it augmented intelligence. Yeah. Whatever you want to do that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable about it. But to your point, you see this a lot. And you gave the example of manufacturing, but you could take that parallel to other environments. I come from a consulting background as well. And it's like, what is the goal? Like, what do you know? And you can map this out and think about AI is it can then reverse engineer and figure out one, like, okay, yes, that did work. Here's a better way or an alternative way. And then here's a guide. And then we create a how-to, we create a video scenario. There's all these things you can role play. There's just so many different ways once you're in there with these customized, these assistants or what I have a question more specific, just, I guess, pique my interest, which is what tools or which Gen AI tools are you using, or is this something that you're custom creating? Yeah,
so it's custom, but I mean, we're not creating the models.
You're creating a wrapper around it.
Sort of a wrapper in a sense. I mean, it's a system that involves, and we see this a lot, it's Gen AI, so there's some LLMs, and it's what's called a multi-agent system. So we have multiple different LLMs. Typically, we do use some of the OpenAI models. So like O3 just came out, the reasoning models, GPT-4, and then also we'll sometimes use even open source models, such as the Llama series from Meta and some others, that we can either prompt engineer or even fine tune in a bit more detail. Fine tune meaning customize that model for a very specific use case. So I might train that model just on, for example, all of those troubleshooting guides for a manufacturing environment. Doesn't need to know the history of Shakespeare and the rest of the internet, just needs to know these models or these text. And so I'm gonna train it on that. So for us, we use a wide variety of different models, and it really just depends on the particular context.
Yeah, and so for those scenarios, like you hear a lot, LLM, which is a large language model, but some folks will take a small language model,
SLM,
right? That's more, it's going to be faster, it's going to be cheaper, and then fine tune it for a specific vertical or use case or industry. Others, there's a lot of different ways that you can use AI in that example. And so we have like such a wide range of folks. I probably should have my AI series glasses on right now, but I can't put them on right now because the dude is way smarter at this stuff than me. So I just like I'll just be pretending. But anyway, I think it is good to see that how you're actually using it both in your organization. I think a good point that you called out is you guys are more or less AI native in how you built the company.
Yeah.
Right. So you had a first mover advantage in the situation where other organizations are trying to completely transform or the word I don't like to use, change
Yeah.
management, like you
Be
know,
a consultant, you got some,
well,
some-
you know, it's like consulting is having its day right now in the age of AI. There's a lot of consultants that are doing some great work, right? And so for us, it's trying to make people either AI literate, AI aware, moving them to AI adoption. And one of the stats that I saw recently, and I was pushing back on someone, which is you have all these McKinsey and Deloitte and everyone else, and they say, you know, 90% of organizations are saying that they're using AI.
Yeah.
But is that one person in the company? Or because it affects every single employee, right? And so for your manufacturing company, right, that's a laggard industry in itself, right? What percentage would you say of the manufacturing floor is actually using GenAI or is aware?
Ooh, it's a great question. Because to your point, it's how many people in the organization and to what extent, you know, have they logged into ChatGPT this month or do they use it 4 hours a day?
Right.
Yeah, there's such a wide spectrum there. I would think with a lot of these manufacturing environments, it's still a small percentage, you know, and we try to build tools that are very intuitive for them to use. So it's almost like they don't know they're using it and they may use it then for that specific thing. And our hope and our goal is that by using and seeing success in one area with maybe a machine diagnosis, then they start applying it other places. And maybe they start applying it at home to help with a recipe, to help with, you know.
Oh, there's the
God knows what else.
Look, we're going to have, look. It's like we're gonna have like a flashing. I was told yesterday by someone that listened to our first episode, could you guys stop talking about recipes? I said everyone talks about it. It's not me.
Really? Okay.
I think we're like 8 for 8. I don't know how many episodes we've done so far.
Damn, I guess that's the go-to then.
Everybody, well, because it's applicable to everybody,
it is,
right?
It is.
And so that's why I love taking some of these prompts and hearing the things that you're doing them, because then I immediately filter how would I use this through my lens, right? And if we take it back to talking about the institutional knowledge, right? When I first started working with Greg Boone, I had 4 different LLCs that I was managing HR for all 4 of them. That meant every time an employee would call me to say, hey, how much PTO do I have? I had to know what company do they belong to? What PTO plan are they on? Are they on a different legacy plan because there were mergers between the little baby LLCs? And I had to do that for every single person that would call me, you know? And so that's a lot of knowledge. And especially as a new person, it took me a lot of time to figure everything out.
Yeah.
If I had AI back then, I could have easily created 4 different HR assistants for all of the different LLCs. I could have plugged in the handbook for all of those, right? So it reads out all the policies. And then when I get that person that's like, hey, what's going on with my 401k? What's the match here? I don't have to be like, oh my God, is it 2%? Is it 3%? Who are you? I plug it in and I get the answer and I get it instantaneously. So I share that because I love it when we talk about these things. I think about it through my lens, right? You think about it, Greg, through yours, and Chris, you apply it in 16 different ways, right?
Yeah.
So it's so fascinating, but.
Well, just one thing on that point, right? What you didn't, well, I'm going to kind of bring it all home is we talk a lot about how we can bring joy back and how we can be more human. Think about being able to lower someone's angst because in that moment, right? She didn't have to go say, let me get back to you tomorrow with that, right? Yeah. In that moment, you're able to solve someone's pain point, right? And you know, customer experience, I would always define for folks. I was like, it's the delta between what you expected and then the reality of whatever happened. Yeah. And the wider that gap is, right, the worse the experience is. So the closer you can bring together expectations and reality, the better, right? So this person went out of their way to call Erica. What they didn't want is for Erica to then say, I'm gonna call you in a week. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they were hoping by calling was they're going to get an answer in that moment, right? And so you see all these different examples of how people are using in customer service. You're seeing in different aspects of it. But I do think that we need to put a finer point for folks. And like, this is about also being able to, you know, spend more time doing the things you want to do. And less time, because just like for that person that angst, I'm sure Erica got off the phone like, shit, another one of these. I got to go spend the next day trying to figure out all this crap or ask 5 other people, right? And take away all of this time to do this thing. Not that it wasn't important, right? It was super important, but not a great use of anyone in that workflow's time. Yeah. Right.
I love to think about it in terms of like ROI, right? Like what are the actual tangible metrics that we can look at? And the first thing that popped into my head was we're going to have to really start calculating how many times people say, let's circle back on that. Yeah. Because you're not going to need to circle back anymore. I got busted
It's a good
for saying
metric
that in the
right
office
there.
the other day.
Yeah.
How often do you circle back?
Yeah.
That's the new metric to keep it up with, right? Oh my gosh. So Chris,
Yeah, that's huge.
what piece of business advice would you give to leaders who maybe are more in my lane, the curious lane, right? We
Sure,
just like
sure.
to dip our pinky toe in,
Yeah.
test the waters. We are curious, but we are hesitant. What piece of advice would you give us?
Well, start small. I mean, back to that point of eating the elephant or the whale or whatever the analogy you want to pick is. And I think you brought up a really good point just to touch on what you guys both just mentioned is, yes, there's the time saving, but there's a reduction of this emotional burden of, oh, I'm waiting for that person to come back or I'm waiting for this to happen. That's taking up emotional space. I only have so much I can care about that's going to distract away from what I should care about. So there's almost that intangible there. But back to what the advice would be, it would be to talk to your employees, talk to your team, and to understand what those things are, not just those tasks that they feel like aren't the best use of their time or that take them a lot of time that maybe could be automated, but the ones that are stressing them or they're putting a burden on them or distracting them from the things that they should be doing or the things that are more valuable, maybe the more strategic things. And I think that's really a place to start, and then start small in ways to take away some of the burden of those tasks, whether by automation or whatever the case may be. But yeah, using that as sort of a GPS of where should I start is, what's taking away that valuable attention and mental and emotional energy from my team.
There's a lot there, man. You talk about that angst and that time. There was some article I was reading a couple years back, and they were talking about how anxious employees get when you're like in Slack or something, and it's got the little dots and they're writing.
Yeah.
Right. When you see the writing that someone's writing something, people are now, there's anxiety that's being created, right? Because they're now anticipating something.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that the person just decided to get up and walk away and go to the bathroom and come back. The person on the other side has no idea, right? What's happening? All they're sitting there, they're just waiting. I'm like, oh no, I don't know. Was it something that I said? Was it this and that? Right. Yeah. And so that's one thing I want to unpack. The other thing that was this weird phenomenon I've heard a lot lately is that because we are kind of trained to be nicer to the AI, right? We say please and thank you. People realize how shitty they are to their friends and their coworkers when they Slack or send email. And so now people are sending more thoughtful responses. Or you have someone like Erica that, she'll say, I was coming in hot and then I ran it through Cheryl, my customized GPT, and she cleaned it up. There was even a commercial, I think it was Super Bowl or something. I think it was Apple or someone. And someone had something and they're like, make this more professional or whatever. Right. I don't use it personally for email unless I'm like attaching some document or whatever. But I can see how that would matter. But that angst, we don't talk about that enough. But the time value, like being able to shorten that window so I don't have that angst is important.
What's your favorite personal AI tool?
Probably ChatGPT.
Yeah. Oh, God. How that just leads into my next segment, which is dun, 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 dun,
lob it up.
On the show, we play the game Last Chat. Okay. So if you would please access your favorite tool.
Here we go.
Here we go, y'all. Last Chat is the game where we ask you to go straight into your phone and tell us what is your last prompt. And if you need to apply some context to kind of give us that background, please do. And we will play too. We will share with you our innermost vulnerable moments with the chat.
Yeah, this could be a little risky.
Sometimes I'm not prepared. Sometimes I'm like clearly not prepared.
This is live or this now. So, I mean, it's a little boring, but it's practical. So it's a PowerPoint slide where I just had my bullets for like my table of contents. I'm asking about if it's a good design standard, should they be higher up? Should they be vertically centered? Talk through what works, what doesn't work. So super basic kind of thing, but...
Why did you do that? What's the context? Like, why did you decide to do that?
I've been trying to intentionally use it more because I think sometimes I just won't use it. And so I was trying to find ways where I almost experiment, but like, is it going to tell me something that I didn't already know? And so I've kind of been going through with certain things. And in this case, it gave me some advice. I actually did make a slight change of the way I centered the bullets. And I was like, I didn't really think about it that way. Other times I'll ask it a routine thing and it'll give me the same feedback I would have come up with. Or sometimes I'll disagree with it. I'll be like, I don't really know about that change. But it's something I'm just getting in the habit of, sort of a brainstorming partner.
Incredible. All right, Greg, what's yours? What's your last chat?
I always get to go last. I don't get to go last.
It's not always thing.
Well, one of the comments I was going to say just to that's you brought up a great concept and an idea. A lot of folks have this kind of view that, AI or Gen AI in particular is never going to help you create novel ideas or new ideas or new things, right? Now, everyone is on this race from OpenAI to Grok to you name it to AGI or super intelligence, right?
Yeah,
like everything that we're doing right now is just so all of these companies can get to AGI, which is what is it? Artificial general intelligence or something.
Yep.
But basically, the idea that it's smarter than every human, right, or the singularity event, or however you want to describe it, right. And so I'm just calling it out because what now they're starting to say is actually new ideas are starting to be formed, right? New ways of thinking, right? Going back to your, the shop floor, like, you probably couldn't have done that with the tools and technologies before, but now you can do it in a more cost-effective way.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm not going to belabor the point because she's still looking at me like, but what did you put in there? So this one I think is a good one for you and I to kind of nerd out just for a second here, Chris, which is, it's a little bit leading the witness in the sense I said, if any software can be replicated easily in the age of AI, what constitutes a defensible moat? So the idea of how do you protect your business? So one of the things you said earlier was what I would describe as service as a software. You're saying you're still a services company at the core, but your services are wrapped around productization.
Right.
So I've been on this search. I'm like, hey, if any technology can be effectively replicated easily, then how do you defend the next software? Right. And so it came, first thing it does, and I was just for greater context, I was using 4.0 deep research.
Love deep
because
research.
I was trying to get McKinsey level or consulting level kind of response.
Right.
So it will always ask you clarifying questions, right? There's a theory behind that for some folks are saying they ask you these questions so that it limits the number of runs you do because runs cost them money and it costs energy and everything else. So they ask you clarifying questions to get to that down. But it came back and it asked what type of industry. And I said startups, B2B. It asked me 4 questions. I say, yes, any moat you come up with, and yes, give me a framework, right? And it gave back a very detailed, like, one, this is why it's a problem. This is how I would go about it. Here's some of the ways that you could think about it. And it cites a ton of different sources, right? And so when I tell people all the time, I was like, I use it different than most people because I'm trying to ideate and I'm trying to create the next idea. And because it's trained and learned so much from me, everything, no matter what I ask it, it gives me a monetization strategy. Right. No matter what, I could put it in there like I got bad knees, and and if you want a business idea, Greg, here's okay. So,
but it knows you.
It knows him, and mine pretty much knows me. But I actually stuck my little pinky toe in. It's not a recipe. I stuck my pinky toe in the other day. And I used the creative writing coach agent that's now in ChatGPT. I just happened to see that was there. And y'all know I'm a keynote speaker. I got a keynote coming up about team chemistry and respect in May. And I've got the entire thing written, but I was really struggling to tie my closing together with the story I told in the introduction. And so I literally just went to chat and I said, hey, I've got this keynote I'm delivering. If I give you what I've written so far, can you help me craft a compelling ending that ties it all together for me? And of course, she said, I'd love to help with that. Send me your keynote and I'll help you do that. Feel free to include any tone or messaging you want to leave your audience with too. And so then I was able to provide it with, of course, the keynote that I wrote, plus some additional context. And, we were talking a little bit earlier about how it will, reconfirm what you think. And it made me LOL a bit because I'm like, this chat always hypes me up. Like, she's like, oh my God, that's fire. You have created something rich and compelling.
Probably sounds a lot different than ours.
I'm like, damn, I am the shit. Like, woo. So, but either way.
How much did you pay Cheryl?
Listen, Cheryl is my hype woman, my number one hype woman. But it really did give me a true closing that is so close to how I speak when I am on stage that I was like, I don't think there's much I need to change on this. Now, granted, I gave it a lot to work with, right? I mean, almost an entire keynote, but I could have sat there for hours and still not been happy, right? And then just to share, to take it a step further before I ask you our final question, is I also said, hey, I'd like to take this keynote and translate it into slides that aren't distracting, that will enhance the power of my keynote. Like, what are your thoughts and suggestions?
Sure, yeah.
And then I start ideating from there. So it's just really interesting how you
Wait. So you helped it do your work, but if your kids use it,
it's cheating.
It's cheating.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Yep.
Do what I say, not what I do. Okay,
You gotta know the boundaries, right? You gotta know the boundaries. But Chris, we always love to move people along this continuum of, AI, anxious to curious to serious. And we always ask our guests, what is the one thing you would advise someone to do in the next 24 hours to really move that needle wherever they are on the continuum to just get them a little bit further?
Wow, that's a really good question. And I was just thinking that my last prompt was not as interesting as your guys either, but in the 24 hours, I think it's trying more creative prompting strategies. And so it's like,
what if they've never heard of the term prompt?
That's a good question.
Like, walk them all the way back. Someone's never used.
Yeah, I would definitely just download the free ChatGPT. So just on the website, and just take some task that you're doing. So it could be back to the recipe, or it could be back to I'm planning a trip, or it could be I'm giving a presentation at work tomorrow, and just talk to it as if it was a person, which probably feels weird at first and kind of still feels a little bit weird, but going through that process of talking back and forth with it and just being sort of free flow stream of consciousness with it, and just building a degree of familiarity, I would say would be the first thing. And then you naturally start coming to some other prompts, like the ask clarifying questions is a really, really good one. And you could tell it things of style and all kinds of different things. You can even have it critique you and come back and do a lot of really specific things. But definitely starts with getting over that initial barrier of I'm talking to an AI. And it kind of sounds like a person, but it isn't.
I quoted my AI one time, and I realized as I was telling someone that, oh shit, that was a conversation I was basically having with myself that I just quoted.
Right.
Because I spent, it was a couple months ago, I spent about 15 hours just going back and forth between Gemini and ChatGPT on some business thing that I was just nerding out on. And then later that following week, I was like, someone was talking to me about this. And I was like, nope, that was me.
That wasn't somebody.
That was the machine talking back to me. So.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time, for sharing what Astral Insights is up to. I mean, super fascinating stuff in the world of supply chain, an area I never really would have considered AI to already be existing.
This is your moment right now.
Oh, yeah.
You're having a moment.
This is the year. Yeah.
I'm here for it, but thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
Thanks for joining us on AI, Voice or Victim. If you want to stay competitive in the AI age, start now. Take one insight from today's episode and put it into practice in the next 24 hours. Make sure to follow us, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more actionable AI insights. See you next time.